Hi everyone, welcome to Alexa Flexibility, and this is the first part of helping students to prepare for lightness and extension in their Arabesque position. And one of the most important things in this section is for students to learn to get the most out of each stretch, and that we want to be training in each stretch what they want to be doing in the actual Arabesque. So in Arabesque, we want to have lightness and yet strength and control. So a lot of students will over tense or overuse their muscles, and that will create pain in the back. Or they won't be able to lift the leg into their best extension, or they might go the other way and have no strength support, maybe tapping into their hypermobility and not using lightness and control, just kind of splaying or dropping into the position. So it's really important we train this in our actual stretches. So here we are, we're going to do the first version. We're going to do the same stretch 3 times in a row, but our demo student here is going to use 3 different types of control. So this first control, and Meredith, you can go ahead and bend that back leg. She's keeping a light core connection, light hip opening there, so that she can go ahead and use her connection. She's going to reach back and grab that hand with the same hand, same leg. So you can see that she's got her core lifted, she's square in the hips, she's light and controlled, but not over gripping. So here she's getting the most out of the stretch. And then she's going to be letting that go. And we should see a nice drop and opening into that where she gets a release into the stretch. And this is what we're looking for. Now, Meredith, I'm going to have you do this, show us the bad version. What would happen if you let yourself just splay out, okay? So if she tapped into her hypermobility and let herself just lose control and just really drop into the position, that she's not focusing on core control, she's maybe having a vague squaring in there, she's just really collapsing into the stretch. Now, if she goes ahead and does that same stretch in this position, go ahead, Meredith, what she's going to find is that everything just disconnects. It's hard to control her body. She doesn't have the connection, and she's not actually getting anything out of the stretch. Meredith, do you actually feel the stretch when you're doing it this way? No, and you do in the other way. Exactly. All right, so we're going to have her let go and tap out of that. That's almost doing the stretch for nothing. That's wasting her time. Now, Meredith, could you do the other version where you're over tensing everything? So I'm going to have her lift her hips a little bit up out of the position to show most of the students who over tense will kind of hold themselves up over the position. Now she's gripping. So she's gripping with her glutes, she's gripping with her quads, maybe her hamstring as well. And Meredith, go ahead and do that again for us. So this will look very over tense. She might not even be able to grab that back leg. We might see her bone kind of lifting up as she's trying to catch it. You can see she's really struggling to catch it. These are going to be the signs. She might still look good where her core is in and she's fairly square. But she'll often say, that type of student will often say things like, I don't feel the stretch, or I just feel like I'm sitting here in the position, and not getting anything out of it because they're over tensing. Thanks, Meredith. You can let that go. And you might even notice that that student will come away from stretching saying, I feel sore, or I don't feel good after the stretching. Those are all signs of over tensing, and this is what we're trying to avoid. So really important that we want to use the stretches with lightness and control, the same lightness and control that we're going to be using in the elements. All right, so looking to prepare our students for that lightness and extension, their Arabesque, one important thing, as well as making sure they're getting the most out of each stretch, is which stretches do we need to target for each particular student. So right now what we're going to do is a series of little tests, so you can check different areas and see if the student is tight in a different area. There may be multiple areas that they need to work on, so you know a little bit more which areas to target. So in this first test that we're going to be doing, this is for glutes and for the outside of the hip flexor. So if the student is tied in the hip flexor, or in the glutes outside of the hip, this is going to show up as looking really tight. So Meredith here is actually a good test right now. She looks nice and open. Her front leg is at a 45-degree angle. She's got that front knee fairly open, at least at her hip height there. And she's sitting into her back of her hip flexor on the back leg. She's squared in her hips, that's very important. And she's got her core lifted in. And then to further test, ask her to bend the back leg. So she's going to bend the back leg, catch the same hand, same leg, and to bend and catch, what we're looking for is that she can keep an equal balance between the two hips. So her front knee is still opening, her front hip is pulling back, and her back hip is coming forward. And we want to see an equal amount of front hip pulling back hip squaring down. When you see that equal amount, that's knowing that the student has a good balance between both. Thank you, that looks great. Great, so here now we're looking at that same test of the glutes outside of the hip, and we notice that this student is a lot tighter. So this student would be showing us that she really needs to work on that area. Both glute stretching and outside of the hip and hip flexor. So it's kind of the 3-in-1. So you can see that her weight is tilted off. She is not able to keep a level weight between the two hips. That's one sign of the tightness. Her back hip is not square. She would need to pull the front hip back and then bring the back hip forward for it to be more square. And you can also see that with her front knee, it's up higher and she's not able to drop it out. So a good sign that they're more open is the equality between the three positions, whereas here you can see that everything is a little set off. So now for this next test, we're going to look at the hip flexor flexibility. So obviously to be able to have that nice light arabesque, they're going to have good hip flexibility. So we're looking at being able to sit in this position with the ribs in, core in, hips squared, so you can see that she's nice and light and square there. She's got a straight line with her core, her ribs are in, everything is flat, and her hip flexor on the support hip, on her bottom hip, is coming forward. So she's got a space between her heel and her bump. Everything is nice and open. This is showing us what she should be able to do, that she's got nice hip flexibility, and that's not going to be her biggest issue. So as they're getting in, we should be able to see a really nice position from here. That as she's set up, we want to see the back hip to be square, but you can see that her back hip is not square. She's also arching in her back, and so she dropped down in her core. She's not able to lift her core all the way up to straight. And her front hip is extending forward, so she's also not squaring in this direction. To show us that she would have good hip flexor flexibility, we'd see that front hip pulling back, the back hip coming forward, and a really nice core lift with a straight back in there. So this is showing us tight hip flexors. All right, so for this test is to see if students have enough outside of the hip stretch and hamstring. This will give them the good turnout and also the extension for the arabesque. So she's going to take her leg up with a strap to 90 degrees. She's about 2 yoga blocks away from the wall, and she's going to cross that foot over. And what we're looking for is that she can easily cross it over at 90 degrees, touch the wall with the inside of her foot. So only the inside of the edge of her foot is touching the wall. Her pinky toe is pulling down towards us. Her foot is flat as it possibly can be, really flexed and flat. And she feels nice and light through the outside of her calf, through the T-band area, outside of the hip. She can keep her glute down. Can you just slide your hand down behind your glute so that we can see how far your hip is down? So you can see that her hip is a little bit rolled up because of the extension, but she's squaring it down in that position, okay? And if they can do that and they feel nice and comfortable there, that's showing us that this is not their most important area to work on for the stretching for the arabesque. Want the top leg to go straight to the wall on the inside edge of their foot resting against the wall. So she's going to do her best to put the inside edge, the pinky toe rolling down towards us, the foot totally flexed. So you can see that this is really tight for her. It's hard for her to pull the pinky toe flat all the way down, and it's hard to bring her foot completely flat. We also see her knee rolling in, and her hip is lifted up on our side. She's not able to drop her hip down on our side. So this would be a good sign that outside of the hip is tight, and that she has some IT band tightness as well in there. And ideally, we'd like the leg to be at 90 degrees.
For the hamstring test that we're going to do, we're going to have her go ahead and reach her hands forward. As the hands are reaching forward, we want to put one on either side of the block, and we're looking that the student can come with a flat back coming from the hips, especially bringing the hip flexor on the support hip forward while the knee is staying straight and the hips are staying square. Flexed foot, toe up to the ceiling. She's going to go ahead and place her hands down on the floor, and what we're looking for is that they can easily bring the bum forward and they can square the hips, and the foot is nice and straight in the front. So you can see that she's got some definite tightness going on here. Her foot isn't straight. She's not able to yet bring the hip coming forward, the hip flexor coming forward towards the block. And she's also, you can see, popping into her hyperextension in her knee just a little to try to compensate for the tightness in the hamstring. So we're going to be working on that to get her improved for her Arabesque. All right, so another really important concept that the students need to understand to have that lightness and control, the lightness and length and control in their Arabesque, is understanding how to lift up and back from the core while the hip is in extension. So this is an exercise that we practice in the stretches so that later when she goes to the Arabesque position, she's going to be able to feel how to lift the core up and in while lengthening the hip up into extension without dropping too much in the lower back. So for this exercise, she's going to set up into the Arabesque position. She's going to go ahead and make sure her hips are really square, thinking about the front hip pulling back hip relaxing down and forward. Very important that the core is locked in, so you can see that she's lifting from her lower core and her ribs, making as straight a line as possible from her bum to her shoulder. Head resting on the wall is totally fine. They want to be very relaxed in the glutes, relaxed in the hips. Everything should be soft. The core is strong and working. She's going to go ahead and reach up from her arm coming straight up. And she's going to bring her head back and start with her arching using her upper back. So we should see upper back and shoulder, upper back and shoulder, remembering to keep square. So thinking about bringing her front hip back hip forward. And when she reaches the maximum amount of her upper back and shoulder, I think she's got a little bit more, then she's going to think about lifting the core up and back. And this is the important concept, not dropping into her lower back, lifting her core. She's going to bend her back leg. Once she catches her back leg, she'll do a nice soft relaxing catch there, bringing her elbow up to the ceiling, thinking about her front hip pulling back more so that she can really square her hip. Now she's dropped her chest forward quite a lot, so this is the concept we need for Arabesque, that she can lift her core up and back into her back hip. So we really want to see that visual change that she can lift up and back in there. Then she's going to let go of that leg and come back to the position. So from here, I'm going to have her show it again, but showing it the bad way. So for this way, I'm going to have her drop her chest and not lift up and back into the hip as she's going. So Catherine, go ahead and start the same. So she's going to start with her arm up. She's really going to find her squaring. Nice ribs in, bringing her head back, using her upper back and shoulders, really finding that upper back and shoulder length. Now here's the difference. When she starts to bend her back leg, she's going to go ahead and bend her back leg. She's going to try to catch and not worry about bringing her core, her ribs up and back. So this would be this dropping down. Okay, this is what we don't want. That's going to put them into the lower back and cause stress and close the hip. Now, Catherine, can you transfer that to doing it the good way, to lift up into your core and shift up and back? So you can use the back leg a little to help you lengthen back.
And the more you shift the core, the more you shift up and back, the more you're going to be using the hip flexibility for this. So she's really trying to think of the up and back. Can you do one more time and let us do the bad way again? She's going to drop into the bad way, not using the hip, using her lower back, and now lifting up through her core, through her hip flexibility, up and back into the hip, and they're really shifting up, 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 and back into the, there it is, there it is.